Deep in Egypt's Valley of the Kings lies a tomb unlike any other, KV55. When archaeologists opened it in 1907, they found a puzzling scene: a damaged mummy, a chaotic mix of burial goods, and inscriptions deliberately chiseled away. For over a century, scholars have debated, is this the final resting place of Pharaoh Akhenaten, the heretic king who defied Egypt's ancient gods? Or could it belong to another member of the Amarna royal family? Modern DNA analysis offers clues, but not a clear answer. Why was this person's memory erased so deliberately? And what secrets are still buried with them? What do you think? Is KV55 Akhenaten's tomb, or someone else entirely? Share your thoughts, because your perspective might reveal a new angle to this mystery. Tomb KV55 was discovered in 1907, not far from the famous resting places of Tutankhamun and other rulers of Egypt's 18th dynasty. But the scene inside KV55 was unlike any other royal burial. It seemed rushed, incomplete, even violated. Many objects were present, yet they didn't match the careful order and grandeur typical of pharaonic tombs. Some inscriptions had been carefully carved, only to be deliberately erased. The mummy itself was in poor condition, deteriorated more severely than expected for its age. Among the fragments of funerary goods, scholars recognized connections to the Amarna period, the brief and controversial era when Pharaoh Akhenaten replaced Egypt's traditional gods with the worship of Aten, the sun disk. This connection immediately fueled speculation that KV55 might hold Akhenaten himself. But the details didn't quite line up, and from that moment, the debate began. Early examinations of the skull and teeth suggested the remains belonged to someone around 30 years old. Yet Akhenaten is believed to have ruled for at least 17 years, meaning he likely died in his mid-40s. Later, DNA testing revealed a close genetic link to Tutankhamun, indicating the KV55 mummy was either his father or another very close relative. That seems to support the Akhenaten theory. After all, Akhenaten was Tutankhamun's father. But it's not conclusive. Why, then, was the tomb so haphazard? And why was the name removed? One theory suggests that after the fall of the Amarna period, when Akhenaten's radical religious reforms were rejected, his successors deliberately tried to erase him from history. His name was hacked out, his tomb dismantled, and his burial was carried out in secrecy, almost as an afterthought. But if that were true, why wasn't the mummy simply left in Amarna, the city he built? Why bring him to the Valley of the Kings, a sacred place reserved for recognized rulers? For decades, researchers have turned to modern technology to search for answers. CT scans of the bones revealed unusual features, possibly linked to genetic disorders or malnutrition. Some scholars believe Akhenaten suffered from a medical condition that affected his appearance, which could explain the strangely elongated, almost androgynous depictions of him in Amarna art. DNA testing also indicated a father-son relationship between the KV55 mummy and Tutankhamun, reinforcing the theory. Yet the evidence remains fragile, incomplete. Ancient DNA is easily damaged, and the samples are limited. Others argue the remains could belong to Smenkhkare, a mysterious figure who may have co-ruled with Akhenaten or briefly taken the throne after him. Each new discovery only adds another layer to the puzzle, and no definitive answer has emerged. What makes KV55 even more mysterious is the lack of traditional funerary texts. Unlike other royal tombs, there are no elaborate wall paintings guiding the soul to the afterlife. No inscriptions proclaiming divine titles. In ancient Egyptian belief, a person's name needed to be written to ensure eternal life. To erase a name was to erase a person from existence. This deliberate act of destruction suggests someone wanted the memory of Cave 55's occupant wiped from history. For many, this is proof that it must be Akhenaten, the heretic king whose revolution was despised by later rulers. But if he was so hated, why was his body still brought to the Valley of the Kings instead of being abandoned in the ruins of Amarna? Could there have been a secret attempt to protect the royal family's honor, even while erasing his legacy? The investigations have never stopped. Each new wave of technology brings fresh attempts to analyze the remains, from microscans of the bones to facial reconstructions to refined DNA sequencing. Yet the results stay frustratingly inconclusive. Some clues suggest the body was moved from another location, possibly from a tomb in Amarna, before being reburied in KV55. The unusual damage to the mummy might mean it was exposed to air for some time before reinterment. If that's true, then after Akhenaten's death, his body may have been left neglected, only to be secretly retrieved later by loyalists transferred to the valley. That would make KV55 not just a mystery of identity, but also a story of politics, religion, and revenge at the heart of one of Egypt's most turbulent times. Today, KV55 remains silent, yet it speaks volumes about the chaos that followed the Amarna period. Whether it holds Akhenaten or another forgotten royal, the tomb is a haunting reminder of how even kings can be erased when history turns against them. It continues to fascinate archaeologists because it captures a moment when power, faith, and memory collided in ancient Egypt. And perhaps one day, a tiny fragment of evidence, a new inscription, a more advanced genetic test, will finally reveal the truth. So, what do you think? Is KV55 really Akhenaten's lost tomb? Or does it belong to someone else from his doomed dynasty? Share your thoughts below. Maybe your theory will shed new light on one of Egypt's greatest mysteries. Imagine a thriving capital city of ancient Egypt, filled with palaces, temples, bustling markets, and government offices, completely disappearing from history. That's the story of Ichtawi, the political heart of Egypt's Middle Kingdom. Founded nearly 4,000 years ago, it was the seat of power for centuries. And yet today, no one knows exactly where it is. Ancient records describe it as a place of wealth and stability, but its ruins have never been found. Did shifting rivers bury it under layers of silt? Was it dismantled and built over by later cities? Or is it still waiting, hidden beneath modern farmlands? Where do you think Egypt's lost capital is hiding? Share your theory. It might be closer than we think. Ichtawi was founded around 1985 BCE by Pharaoh Akhenaten, the first ruler of Egypt's 12th dynasty. At the time, Egypt was entering a period of renewal after years of political instability. Akhenaten wanted a fresh start, a new capital that would unify Upper and Lower Egypt and symbolize a new era of centralized power. Ancient texts describe Ichtawi as a flourishing city with grand palaces, administrative complexes, temples, and lively markets filled with merchants and craftsmen. It was more than just a seat of government. It was a cultural and economic hub that shaped the Middle Kingdom's stability. For centuries, this city was the beating heart of Egypt, overseeing irrigation projects, trade networks, and the construction of massive pyramids for its rulers. And yet, unlike Memphis or Thebes, no visible ruins remain. So where did it go? Historians believe the answer lies in the landscape itself. Ancient records suggest Ichtawi was located near the Fayum region, southwest of modern Cairo, an area known for fertile soil and abundant farmland. But over thousands of years, the Nile River has shifted its course multiple times, leaving behind layers of silt, sand, and debris. It's possible that flooding gradually buried the city under thick deposits, hiding it from view. Another theory suggests that later settlements reused its stones, dismantling Ichtawi piece by piece to build new villages and towns. Over time, each new generation quietly erased the traces of what came before. Today, the region is still densely populated and heavily cultivated, making large-scale excavation almost impossible without disrupting modern life. This is why, even though we know roughly where Ichtawi should be, no one has pinpointed it exactly. Modern technology is offering new hope. Archaeologists have turned to satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, and magnetometry to scan the farmlands around Fayum. These methods can detect subtle patterns beneath the soil, the outlines of buried walls, roads, or canals. And in recent years, some promising anomalies have been found. Beneath the fields, researchers have identified traces of ancient foundations, pottery fragments, and administrative seals dating to the Middle Kingdom. These clues strongly suggest that an important urban center once stood there. But is it really Ichtawi? The evidence is still fragmentary, and without a clear excavation, the mystery remains. Like a ghost, the city lingers in historical texts, but refuses to fully reveal itself to the modern world. Why does finding Ichtawi matter? Because it could completely reshape our understanding of Egypt's Middle Kingdom, a time often overshadowed by the more famous Old and New Kingdoms. During this era, Egypt was remarkably stable and prosperous. The rulers of Ichtawi expanded trade, improved agriculture, and reinforced central control. They also built impressive pyramids near Lisht and Dashur, which still stand today as silent markers of their power. But the city that directed these achievements has vanished, leaving a gap in history. If we could uncover Ichtawi, we'd likely find archives, temples, and perhaps even royal tombs that explain how the Middle Kingdom maintained its wealth and stability for centuries. It might even reveal the transition between Old Kingdom traditions and the innovations that later shaped the New Kingdom. Environmental changes may have played a bigger role than we realize. The Fayum region has been continuously settled for thousands of years, and with each era, canals were dug, fields were plowed, and new villages were built. Over time, layer after layer of human activity covered the remains of older cities. It's also possible that the shifting branches of the Nile simply made the site uninhabitable, forcing people to move and leaving Ichtawi to slowly disappear under sand and water. Today, what might have been a thriving capital could lie directly beneath modern farmlands, unseen and forgotten. That's why archaeologists rely so heavily on non-invasive technology, because digging into a living agricultural zone isn't simple. Instead, they look for subtle clues, an unusual mound, a crop mark visible only from the air, or pottery shards turned up by plows. Recent discoveries give us reason to be hopeful. In the past decade, archaeologists have uncovered Middle Kingdom pottery, stone blocks, and even foundations near the Lisht pyramids that align with the right time period. These finds suggest the outskirts of Ichtawi may have been located there. But without a definitive city plan, inscriptions, or a major discovery like a palace complex, we can't yet say with certainty. Ichtawi remains one of Egypt's most tantalizing mysteries. A capital city we know existed, a place that governed an entire civilization, yet somehow left no clear trace. Estelle, it challenges our assumptions about how history survives and reminds us that even the greatest cities can vanish beneath time's shifting sands. So, what do you think happened to Ichtawi? Is it still hidden beneath the farmlands of Fayum, waiting to be uncovered? Or did the Nile erase it forever? Share your thoughts. Your guess might be closer to the truth than you realize. The Great Pyramid of Giza is one of the most iconic monuments on Earth, a structure so massive and precise that it has fueled endless myths. Were they built by slaves, by lost civilizations, or even by something not of this world? The truth is far more human and far more fascinating. Archaeology reveals a story of thousands of skilled workers, carefully organized, well-fed, and even treated with respect. But even with modern technology, questions remain. How did they move millions of massive stone blocks with such precision? What secrets still lie hidden in the stones of Giza? Let's uncover the real story behind the people who built these timeless wonders. And tell me, what's your theory about the pyramids? For centuries, the pyramids of Giza have captured the imagination of the world. Built over 4,500 years ago during Egypt's fourth dynasty, they have long been surrounded by mystery. The largest, the Great Pyramid of Khufu, was once the tallest man-made structure in the world, rising an astonishing 146 meters. It contains over 2.3 million limestone blocks, some weighing several tons. With such incredible scale and precision, many people have asked, how could ancient Egyptians, without modern tools or machinery, possibly build this? For a long time, popular belief, especially in the West, was that armies of slaves toiled under brutal conditions, whipped into submission to create a pharaoh's eternal tomb. Hollywood movies reinforced this image of suffering laborers dragging stones through the desert for a tyrannical king. But archaeology tells a very different story. Excavations around Giza have uncovered what historians now call the workers' village, a settlement where the pyramid builders lived. They weren't slaves. In fact, evidence shows they were a specialized workforce made up of skilled laborers, craftsmen, and seasonal workers who came from across Egypt. They were organized into teams with names like the Friends of Khufu and the Drunkards of Menkaure, suggesting camaraderie and pride in their work. Archaeologists have found bakeries that produced thousands of loaves of bread a day, breweries that brewed beer for the workers, and even medical facilities that treated injuries. Skeletal remains show that the workers were well fed, with diets of meat and fish, luxuries for ordinary Egyptians. This paints a very different picture. Building the pyramids was a national project, a source of honor, not a punishment. So how did they actually move such massive stones? The answer lies in simple but ingenious engineering. Most researchers agree the builders used ramps, either straight, zigzagging, or spiral, made from mud brick and rubble. Stones were dragged on wooden sledges, and ancient texts even describe workers pouring water on sand to reduce friction, making it easier to slide the heavy blocks. Copper chisels and stone tools were used to shape the limestone, and workers leveraged wooden rollers and ropes to maneuver them into place. Archaeological evidence supports these techniques. Remains of ramps have been found, along with tools, rope fragments, and unfinished blocks. Far from being a mystery, the construction was the result of practical problem solving and thousands of coordinated workers. Still, while we know the general methods, some details, like the exact ramp designs and logistics for the largest stones, remain debated. New discoveries continue to shed light on the pyramid builders. In 2013, archaeologists found ancient papyrus scrolls at Wadi al-Jarf, a Red Sea port used during Khufu's reign. These documents belonged to an official named Merer and recorded the transport of limestone blocks from Tura quarries to Giza. It's the oldest written account of pyramid construction ever found and provides a direct glimpse into the logistics. Boats carried stones along the Nile. Then workers moved them along canals and ramps to the building site. This shows the pyramids weren't just feats of physical labor. They were feats of planning, organization, and state-level management. Imagine the coordination required: feeding and housing thousands of workers, transporting millions of tons of stone, and keeping the project on schedule without modern technology. Another persistent myth is that the pyramids were built by people from a lost civilization, or even extraterrestrials. While it's true the precision is extraordinary, the sides align almost perfectly to the cardinal directions, and the base is level to within centimeters, there is no need to invoke aliens. The ancient Egyptians were brilliant engineers, astronomers, and mathematicians. They observed the stars, measured the land, and developed techniques passed down over generations. They didn't need advanced technology beyond their own ingenuity. And in many ways, that makes their achievement even more impressive. They accomplished something so lasting that even today, with cranes and computers, we'd struggle to replicate it with the same beauty and durability. Excavations also revealed the human side of the pyramid builders. Near Giza, archaeologists found a cemetery for the workers. These weren't mass graves, but carefully buried individuals, some with evidence of healed injuries, suggesting they were cared for during their lives. This further proves they were not slaves, but respected participants in a massive national effort, likely motivated by loyalty, religion, and pride. It reframes the pyramids not as monuments built on suffering, but as symbols of a civilization's collective will. Still, mysteries remain. How exactly did they raise the massive granite blocks of the king's chamber, some weighing 70 tons? Were there hidden chambers or construction techniques we've yet to discover? Modern tools like 3D scanning and muon detectors are still revealing hidden voids inside the pyramids, suggesting they may hold more secrets than we realize. So, who really built the pyramids? Not slaves, not aliens, but thousands of skilled Egyptian workers united by purpose and belief. They used simple tools, clever techniques, and sheer determination to create something that has lasted for millennia. And while we know much more now than ever before, the pyramids still have their quiet mysteries. What do you think? Do you believe we now truly understand how the pyramids were built? Or do you think there are still secrets waiting to be uncovered? Share your thoughts. Your perspective might just add another layer to this timeless debate. Amenhotep I was one of ancient Egypt's most respected pharaohs. He ruled during the early 18th dynasty, a time of stability and prosperity. And after his death, he was even worshipped as a god. But here's the strange part. We still don't know where his original tomb is. Historical records say he was buried with great honor, yet no archaeologist has ever found it. We know his mummy was later moved to a secret cache to protect it from tomb robbers. But the true location of his original burial site remains a mystery. Was it destroyed, hidden, or perhaps it still lies untouched beneath the sands? Where do you think Amenhotep I's tomb is waiting? Let's piece this puzzle together. Amenhotep I ruled Egypt, around 1526 to 1506 BCE, a time when the kingdom was thriving after the expulsion of the Hyksos invaders. He continued his father Ahmose's policies, strengthening Egypt's borders, expanding into Nubia, and initiating building projects across the country. Unlike some later rulers known for grand monuments, Amenhotep's reign was marked by careful administration and stability. After his death, he and his mother, Queen Ahmose Nefertari, were revered as divine figures. Temples and shrines were dedicated to them, and for centuries they were worshipped as protectors of the Theban necropolis. So it's no surprise that his tomb would have been an important and sacred place. But despite his status, no one has definitively located his original resting place. Some clues suggest his tomb may have been in Dra Abu el Naga, an ancient necropolis near modern Luxor. This site was commonly used for royal burials in the early 18th dynasty, and many of Amenhotep's contemporaries are buried there. Archaeologists have explored numerous tombs in this area, uncovering beautiful wall paintings and funerary artifacts. But none have been conclusively linked to Amenhotep I himself. Another possibility is that his tomb was deliberately hidden or reused in antiquity. Ancient Egyptians often repurposed burial sites, either due to practical reasons or religious changes, which could have erased the original identity of his tomb. Adding to the mystery, Amenhotep II's mummy was not found in its original burial. During the 21st dynasty, around 1000 BCE, Egypt faced widespread tomb robberies. To protect the remains of past rulers, priests secretly moved royal mummies from their original tombs and placed them in hidden caches. Amenhotep's mummy was one of those relocated, eventually discovered in the royal cache at Deir el-Bahari in the late 19th century. This relocation tells us that his original tomb had already been compromised or was at risk. But where exactly was it? Was it plundered and destroyed? Or does it still remain buried under unexcavated ground, waiting for discovery? Modern archaeology has tried to answer these questions using advanced technology. Ground-penetrating radar, satellite imagery, and non-invasive scanning methods have been deployed around Dra Abu el Naga and other potential sites. In recent years, researchers have detected anomalies beneath the sands that could indicate hidden chambers or burial shafts. Excavations in the Theban necropolis have also uncovered artifacts and inscriptions referencing Amenhotep I, suggesting he was indeed honored with a tomb nearby. Yet despite these promising leads, no definitive discovery has been made. It's possible the tomb lies under layers of later construction or has been completely obscured by environmental changes over the millennia. What makes this mystery even more intriguing is Amenhotep I's unique cultural legacy. Unlike many other pharaohs, he wasn't just remembered as a king. He became a symbol of protection and healing. His name was invoked in rituals, and he was worshipped for centuries after his death. Finding his tomb wouldn't just solve an archaeological puzzle. It would shed light on the evolution of royal burials at the start of the New Kingdom and reveal more about the cult that formed around him. It could also help explain the transition from earlier burial practices to the more elaborate tombs in the Valley of the Kings used by later pharaohs like Thutmose III and Hatshepsut. The search for Amenhotep I's tomb continues, with archaeologists hopeful that future excavations or breakthroughs in remote sensing will finally uncover it. Some believe the tomb may even hold untouched treasures and inscriptions that survived the tomb robberies of antiquity. If found, it could rewrite parts of early 18th dynasty history and provide invaluable insight into the political and religious changes of the time. For now, It remains one of ancient Egypt's most captivating, unsolved mysteries. A missing piece in the story of one of its most beloved rulers. So, what do you think happened to Amenhotep I's tomb? Was it destroyed? Hidden forever? Or is it still lying beneath the sands of Luxor? Share your thoughts. Perhaps your perspective might help illuminate the path to one of Egypt's greatest lost treasures. Imhotep was more than just an architect. He was a genius of ancient Egypt, a high priest, a physician, an engineer, and the brilliant mind who designed the first true pyramid at Saqqara. Over 2,000 years after his death, Egyptians worshipped him as a god of wisdom and healing. And yet, for someone so revered, his own tomb has never been found. Was it hidden deliberately? Was it buried beneath centuries of temple expansions? Or has it simply been lost under the sands of time? Imagine the secrets it might hold about one of history's greatest minds. Where do you think the tomb of Imhotep is waiting? Let's explore the clues that could lead us to his final resting place. Imhotep lived during Egypt's third dynasty, around 2650 BCE, serving as the trusted vizier of Pharaoh Djoser. He is best known as the architect of the Step Pyramid at Saqqara, a revolutionary structure that transformed Egypt's traditional mud brick mastabas into monumental stone pyramids. This innovation laid the foundation for the later pyramids at Giza and forever changed the landscape of ancient Egypt. But Imhotep was more than an architect. Historical texts and later legends describe him as a healer, a scholar, and even a philosopher. Over time, his reputation grew so immense that by the late period, more than 2,000 years after his lifetime, he was deified as a god of medicine and wisdom. Temples dedicated to him were built, and pilgrims left offerings seeking cures and guidance. With such honor and reverence, you would expect Imhotep's own tomb to be a grand and well-documented sight. Yet, it has never been identified. Most scholars believe it should be near Saqqara, close to the step pyramid he designed for Djoser. It would make sense for him to be buried near his greatest achievement and near the cult centers that later venerated him. Ancient Greek and Roman texts even mention a temple and a tomb for Imhotep in this area, visited by pilgrims for healing rituals. But despite extensive excavations at Saqqara, no clear evidence of his original burial has been found. Why? One reason could be his later deification. As temples and shrines were built to honor him, the landscape of Saqqara changed dramatically over centuries. His original tomb may have been built over, reused, or intentionally hidden to protect it from disturbance. Religious centers often expanded over older structures, making it difficult to distinguish original burials from later constructions. Additionally, Imhotep's burial might have been designed to be modest, reflecting his role as a servant of the king rather than a ruler himself. If so, it could easily have been overlooked or mistaken for another official's tomb. Modern archaeology continues to search for Imhotep's lost tomb with renewed hope. Ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery have revealed previously unknown chambers and tunnels beneath Saqqara, some of which date back to the Old Kingdom. Excavations have uncovered votive offerings, inscriptions, and statues related to the cult of Imhotep, showing how his legacy endured for millennia. Yet none of these finds have pointed directly to his burial. Some researchers believe his tomb may lie hidden beneath the sprawling network of temples dedicated to him, possibly sealed off by later construction. Others suggest it could be buried under layers of sand and debris, waiting quietly for future technology to uncover it. Finding Imhotep's tomb would be more than just an archaeological victory. It would offer a direct connection to one of the most influential figures in human history. Imagine what we might learn from his burial site. Personal inscriptions, tools he used, or even texts revealing his medical and architectural knowledge. It could provide rare insight into how the ancient Egyptians viewed science, religion, and the role of intellectuals in their society. It might also reveal more about the transition from early mastaba tombs to the Pyramid Age, giving us a clearer understanding of Egypt's architectural evolution. Despite the mystery, Imhotep's legacy is undeniable. Even without a known tomb, his name survived when many others were forgotten. He represents the rare individual in ancient Egypt who achieved immortality through intellect rather than conquest. And perhaps that's why his tomb remains elusive, because his true monument isn't a structure, but the knowledge he left behind. Archaeologists remain hopeful that one day, Saqqara will reveal this missing piece of history. Until then, Imhotep's tomb remains a silent enigma beneath the sands. So what do you think? Is Imhotep's tomb still hidden somewhere in Saqqara, waiting to be discovered? Or has it been lost forever under centuries of temple expansions? Share your thoughts. Your perspective might lead to a new way of looking at this enduring mystery. Akhenaten was unlike any other pharaoh. He shattered centuries of tradition, closed the temples of Egypt's ancient gods, and forced the kingdom to worship only one, Aten, the sun disk. He abandoned the old capital and built a brand new city in the desert, filled with open-air temples to his new faith. For 17 years, he ruled as Egypt's most controversial king. And then, he vanished. No records of his death, no clear tomb, no final resting place. Was he assassinated? Did he die in exile? Or was his memory deliberately erased by those who hated his reforms? What do you think happened to the heretic pharaoh? Let's uncover the clues hidden in the sands of history. Akhenaten began his reign around 1353 BCE as Amenhotep IV, ruling during Egypt's prosperous 18th dynasty. At first, he followed tradition, but soon he made a decision that would shock his kingdom. He rejected Egypt's centuries-old polytheistic religion, where gods like Amun, Osiris, and Isis ruled every aspect of life. Instead, he declared that Aten, the visible disk of the sun, was the only god worthy of worship. This wasn't just a religious change. It was a revolution that overturned the entire power structure of ancient Egypt. The wealthy priesthood of Amun lost their influence. Traditional temples were closed or repurposed, and massive resources were redirected to Aten's worship. For the first time, Egypt seemed to embrace a form of monotheism. To symbolize this dramatic shift, Akhenaten founded a completely new capital city, Akhetaten, known today as Amarna. Built in a remote desert location, it was designed to honor Aten with open-air temples that allowed sunlight to shine directly on worshippers. The city's art also changed dramatically. Instead of the rigid, idealized depictions of pharaohs and gods, Amarna art portrayed Akhenaten and his family in unusually naturalistic forms. Long faces, the narrow limbs, and intimate family scenes showing him with Queen Nefertiti and their children. This was unheard of in traditional Egyptian art, where pharaohs were always shown as distant, godlike figures. To his followers, these changes represented a new spiritual truth. But to many Egyptians, they were deeply unsettling, even dangerous. Akhenaten's reforms created widespread unrest. The priests of the old gods resented losing their power, and ordinary people struggled with the loss of familiar rituals and deities. Diplomatic letters from neighboring states during his reign reveal that Egypt's foreign policy weakened, as Akhenaten seemed more focused on his religious revolution than on protecting Egypt's empire. Enemies saw an opportunity, and allies pleaded for help that never came. By the 17th year of his reign, cracks were appearing everywhere, and then suddenly the records stopped. What exactly happened to Akhenaten? Historians still don't know for sure. There is no clear record of his death, no known tomb, and no inscriptions commemorating his burial. Some scholars think he may have died of illness, possibly linked to a genetic disorder suggested by the unusual depictions of his body in art. Others believe he was assassinated, removed in a palace coup as the backlash against his religious policies reached a breaking point. There's even a theory that he was forced to abdicate and live out his final days in exile, erased from history by those who sought to restore Egypt's traditional ways. What we do know is that after Akhenaten's disappearance, his radical reforms were swiftly undone. His successor, possibly a mysterious co-ruler named Smenkhkare, followed by his son Tutankhamun, restored the old gods, reopened the temples, and abandoned Amarna. Akhenaten's name and images were systematically destroyed, his monuments defaced, and his memory condemned. Later pharaohs referred to him only as the criminal or the enemy, ensuring that future generations would forget his reign. This deliberate erasure explains why we have so few records of his final years. Archaeologists have searched Amarna for clues. They've uncovered ruins of the city, revealing a surprisingly vibrant life during his rule: homes, workshops, letters, and beautiful art. They've even found human remains believed to belong to members of his royal family. But Akhenaten's own body has never been identified. Some speculate that the controversial mummy in KV55, discovered in the Valley of the Kings with its name chiseled out, might be him. DNA links it to Tutankhamun, suggesting a father-son relationship, but the age of the skeleton doesn't match perfectly. Once again, the mystery remains. Today, Akhenaten fascinates scholars and the public alike because he seems so unique. Was he a visionary who glimpsed a new spiritual truth, or a reckless ruler who destabilized his kingdom for personal beliefs? And what happened in those final, silent days of his life? Did he die peacefully? Or was he dragged down by the enemies his revolution created? So, what's your theory? Was Akhenaten a misunderstood prophet of monotheism, or simply a failed pharaoh erased by history? And where do you think his true tomb might still lie hidden? Share your thoughts. Your perspective might add a new dimension to the enigma of the heretic king. The Old Kingdom of Egypt is often called the Age of the Pyramids, a time of unimaginable power and prosperity. For centuries, it seemed unstoppable. Pharaohs commanded absolute authority, the Nile provided abundant harvests, and massive monuments like the Great Pyramid were built to last forever. And yet, it fell. Around 2180 BCE, this golden age suddenly crumbled. The centralized government collapsed, famine swept through the land, and Egypt splintered into chaos. How could such a mighty civilization unravel so completely? Was it climate change, political failure, or something deeper? What do you think caused the fall of the Old Kingdom? Let's trace the hidden forces that brought down one of history's greatest eras. The Old Kingdom lasted from around 2686 to 2181 BCE, spanning Egypt's 3rd to 6th dynasties. It was during this period that the iconic pyramids at Giza were built, symbolizing the pharaoh's divine power and the state's wealth. Egypt's administration was highly centralized. The pharaoh controlled vast agricultural lands, labor forces, and resources. The Nile's predictable flooding ensured abundant crops, fueling a stable economy. To many, it must have seemed like this golden age could never end. But beneath the surface, subtle cracks were forming. Historians now believe that the Old Kingdom was more fragile than it appeared, vulnerable to environmental change and internal pressures. One major factor may have been climate. Geological and climatological studies show that during the late Old Kingdom, the Nile's annual flood levels became increasingly unpredictable. A series of weak floods likely caused prolonged droughts, reduced harvests, and food shortages. Ancient inscriptions from this time hint at famine, social unrest, and declining faith in the pharaoh's ability to maintain Mayat, the cosmic order that kept Egypt balanced. In a society where the king was seen as the divine guarantor of stability, these environmental failures translated into a political crisis. If the Nile failed, it meant the pharaoh had failed. At the same time, the centralized system that had once been the kingdom's strength began to weaken. As the state struggled to maintain resources, provincial governors, called nomarchs, gained more autonomy. They began to build their own tombs, wield local power, and collect taxes independently. The once unified state slowly fragmented into competing regions. The pyramid projects themselves, which required massive labor and resources, may have contributed to the strain. By the end of the 6th dynasty, the royal court had lost much of its authority, and power shifted into local hands. As the pharaoh's control weakened, the ideological foundation of the Old Kingdom crumbled too. For centuries, Egyptians had believed the pharaoh was a god on earth, responsible for maintaining harmony between the human and divine realms. But when famine struck and the central government could no longer provide, people began questioning this divine authority. Texts from the period, like the Ippur papyrus, describe a world turned upside down. The poor rising against the rich, chaos in the land, and temples abandoned. Whether these texts are literal or symbolic, they show how deeply the collapse shook Egyptian society. By around 2180 BCE, the Old Kingdom had effectively fallen apart. Egypt entered what historians call the First Intermediate Period, a century of political fragmentation, rival dynasties, and regional conflict. Monumental pyramid buildings ceased, replaced by smaller, humbler tombs. Trade networks broke down, and art and culture shifted away from the centralized royal style of the Old Kingdom. It was a stark reminder that even the mightiest civilizations can unravel when their economic, environmental, and social foundations weaken all at once. Modern archaeology continues to study this collapse in detail. Drought records from Nile sediments and ancient pollen samples confirm significant climate shifts during this time. At the same time, inscriptions in provincial tombs show how local leaders rose in importance as the central state faltered. This wasn't a single event, but a slow erosion of power over decades, until one day the system simply couldn't hold together anymore. Yet from this chaos came renewal. Eventually, a new dynasty restored unity and stability, leading to the Middle Kingdom, another flourishing era of Egyptian history. The fall of the Old Kingdom reminds us how delicate the balance of power, environment, and belief can be, even for a civilization as enduring as ancient Egypt. So what do you think truly caused the Old Kingdom's collapse? Was it the Nile's changing floods, political corruption, or a deeper crisis of faith in the pharaoh's divine rule? Share your thoughts. Maybe your idea sheds new light on this ancient turning point. The ancient Egyptians spoke of a mysterious place called Punt, a rich, distant land they called the Land of the Gods. From Punt came exotic treasures: gold, ivory, rare woods, incense, even live animals like baboons and giraffes. Pharaohs sent great expeditions across the sea to bring back these wonders, and their journeys were recorded in stunning detail on temple walls. But here's the mystery. No one knows where Punt actually was. Was it in modern-day Somalia, Eritrea, Yemen, or somewhere even farther? Despite centuries of searching, its true location remains a riddle. Could it still be out there, hidden by time and shifting coastlines? Where do you think the lost land of Punt might be? Let's look at the clues. Punt first appears in Egyptian records during the Old Kingdom, around 2500 BCE. It was described as a place overflowing with exotic goods unavailable in Egypt. Aromatic resins like frankincense and myrrh, ebony wood, gold, ivory, leopard skins, and rare animals. These materials were essential for temple rituals, perfumes, and royal luxuries, making Punt a prized trading partner. The Egyptians didn't see Punt as a mythical land, but as a real, reachable place, often referred to with reverence as God's land. Trade with Punt continued for over 1,000 years, but the most famous expedition came during the reign of the female pharaoh Hatshepsut, around 1470 BCE. Hatshepsut's Punt expedition is one of the most well-documented in ancient history. Her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari still has detailed reliefs showing Egyptian ships sailing to Punt, loaded with goods for exchange. They show Punt's rulers greeting the Egyptians, strange houses built on stilts, and exotic animals roaming the land. The reliefs even depict live myrrh trees being uprooted and transported back to Egypt so they could be replanted in temple gardens. These carvings prove that Punt was real, a place with its own people, culture, and wealth. Yet they frustratingly provide no precise map or coordinates. They only say Punt lay to the south and east, beyond the Red Sea. Over the centuries, scholars have proposed many possible locations. Some believe Punt was along the Horn of Africa, in what is now Somalia, Eritrea, or Djibouti. Others argue it could have been across the Red Sea in Yemen, or even farther along the East African coast. The goods described in Egyptian texts do match the resources of these regions. But no single location fits all the evidence perfectly. Climate and geography have changed dramatically over thousands of years, and shifting coastlines may have erased ancient ports that once linked Egypt and Punt. Modern archaeology has tried to solve the mystery using science. Chemical analysis of ancient incense and resins found in Egyptian tombs has traced some materials to the Horn of Africa. DNA studies on mummified baboons believed to have come from Punt link them to modern Ethiopian and Eritrean species. These clues strongly suggest Punt was somewhere along the Red Sea coast of East Africa. But still, no definitive site, no lost harbor or settlement has been uncovered. Without physical ruins, Punt remains more an idea than a pinpoint on the map. One reason Punt is so hard to locate is that it wasn't necessarily a single city or kingdom. It might have been a network of trading communities spread along the coast, rather than one centralized state. If that's true, then there may never have been a single capital of Punt to find. Over time, as Egypt's power waned and trade routes shifted, the connection to Punt faded. Later pharaohs still mentioned it occasionally, but expeditions became rare. Eventually, the name itself disappeared from records, leaving only the tantalizing temple reliefs and inscriptions to remind us of its existence. Finding Punt would be a breakthrough, not just for Egyptian history, but for our understanding of ancient maritime trade. It would show how far-reaching Egypt's connections really were, revealing a network that linked Africa, Arabia, and possibly even beyond. Imagine uncovering an ancient harbor filled with Egyptian pottery or inscriptions left by traders. It would prove how globalized the ancient world truly was. Until then, Punt remains one of history's great enigmas, a lost land that shaped Egypt's wealth and rituals, but slipped through the cracks of time. So, what's your theory? Was Punt in the Horn of Africa, across the sea in Arabia, or somewhere else entirely? Share your thoughts. Maybe your idea brings us one step closer to finding the lost land of the gods. The Great Pyramid of Giza is one of the most studied monuments in the world, yet even it holds a subtle mystery. Today, its peak is flat, but originally, it was crowned with a sacred capstone known as the Benben stone. Ancient texts describe it as polished limestone or possibly gilded in gold, gleaming under the desert sun as a symbol of divine power. But at some point in history, it vanished. Was it stolen? Removed during a religious upheaval? Or did it crumble and disappear naturally over time? Without this final piece, the Great Pyramid feels incomplete. What do you think happened to the missing Benben stone? Let's explore the theories behind this small but powerful piece of history. In ancient Egyptian belief, the Benben stone held deep spiritual meaning. It symbolized the primordial mound that emerged from the waters of chaos at the dawn of creation, the very first place where sunlight touched the earth. Temples across Egypt often had smaller Benben stones as sacred objects, representing this connection between earth and the divine. For the Great Pyramid, the capstone, called the pyramidion, was the final, most sacred piece. It completed the pyramid both physically and spiritually, embodying the pharaoh's journey to eternal life among the gods. Some accounts suggest the Benben stone of the Great Pyramid was made of highly polished white limestone, while others hint it may have been covered in gold or electrum to shine brilliantly in the sunlight. Imagine how it must have looked. A radiant beacon atop the largest pyramid ever built. But today, the topper of the Great Pyramid is flat. The capstone is gone, and no definitive record explains why. Theories abound. One possibility is natural erosion. Over thousands of years, Egypt's harsh desert winds, temperature fluctuations, and rare but intense storms may have weakened the stone until it simply fell or crumbled. But if that were the case, we might expect to find fragments nearby. Yet none have been conclusively identified. Another theory is deliberate removal. Throughout Egypt's long history, later rulers often stripped older monuments for their materials. During the Middle Ages, much of the smooth outer casing of the Great Pyramid was taken to build mosques and palaces in Cairo. It's entirely possible the capstone, with its high-quality stone or potential gold plating, was removed during one of these periods for reuse. There's also the idea of religious or political motives. Ancient Egypt experienced many waves of religious change and political upheaval. Monuments tied to earlier rulers or gods were sometimes defaced or dismantled to erase their legacy. Could the Benben stone have been deliberately removed during such a purge? Perhaps when the worship of the sun god Ra evolved, or during the Amarna period under Akhenaten. Without inscriptions or records, we can only speculate. Modern archaeology continues to investigate this subtle mystery. Researchers have studied other pyramidion stones from smaller pyramids and temples, some of which survive in museums. These examples show that pyramidions were often beautifully crafted with inscriptions, polished surfaces, and sometimes even metal coverings. If the Great Pyramid's Benben stone was similar, it would have been a valuable object, making it an attractive target for reuse or theft. Some historians suggest it may have been removed during Roman times, when ancient monuments were systematically quarried for building materials. Others think it could have been taken much earlier, during periods of internal Egyptian conflict, leaving the pyramid incomplete long before the medieval era. What's intriguing is that despite centuries of exploration, no one has definitively found the missing capstone. No fragment in the Cairo Museum, no overlooked block in the surrounding ruins, no clear ancient account of its fate. Some even speculate it might still be buried nearby, hidden under the sand or rubble at Giza. A few fringe theories propose it was taken far away, perhaps even by foreign invaders. But there's no evidence to support that. What remains clear is that without the Benben stone, the Great Pyramid is missing its symbolic crown, the very piece that completed its spiritual purpose. Yet in a way, the absence of the Benben stone has added to the pyramid's mystery. It reminds us that even the most studied monument in the world can still hold unanswered questions. The missing capstone may seem like a small detail, but it connects to deeper themes. The fragility of history, the layers of human activity over thousands of years, and the way monuments evolve in meaning over time. Archaeologists continue to study the pyramid structure, hoping that new clues, perhaps a hidden chamber or an ancient inscription, might mention the lost capstone. Until then, it remains one more enigma among many at Giza. So what do you think? Was the Benben stone of the Great Pyramid stolen, repurposed, or simply lost to time? Do you believe it's still out there, waiting to be rediscovered? Share your thoughts. Your theory might shine new light on this overlooked yet fascinating piece of history. For over 2 centuries, archaeologists have been digging into Egypt's past, uncovering temples, tombs, and treasures beyond imagination. Yet for every question answered, new mysteries emerge. Lost capitals like Ichtawi, missing tombs of rulers like Amenhotep or Mentuhotep, vanished lands like Punt, and hidden chambers inside the pyramids still keep their secrets. Ancient Egypt seems to be a civilization that reveals just enough to amaze us, but never everything. What other stories are still buried beneath the desert sands, waiting to be uncovered? Do you think we'll ever know the full truth? Or will Egypt always keep some of its secrets? Let's take one last look at why this ancient land still fascinates the world like no other. Ancient Egypt was one of the longest-lasting civilizations in history, enduring for more than 3,000 years. It saw the rise and fall of entire dynasties, the construction of monuments so massive they still defy comprehension, and the creation of a complex belief system that connected the heavens to the earth. Yet even with all we've learned, the Rosetta Stone unlocking hieroglyphs, the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, the mapping of ancient cities, there are still huge gaps in the story. Whole chapters of history are missing. We don't know where some pharaohs are buried, why certain cities vanished, or how some of the most iconic monuments were built with such precision. The desert has preserved so much, but it has also hidden just as much. Part of the reason is Egypt's sheer scale. The Nile Valley is long and vast, and thousands of years of human activity have layered one era over another. Ancient cities were buried, rebuilt, and buried again. Rivers shifted their courses, swallowing settlements in silt. Later generations repurposed temples and tombs, erasing names and rewriting history. Political upheavals like Akhenaten's religious revolution or the invasions of foreign powers left deliberate gaps as successors erased what they didn't want remembered. And over time, the desert sands simply covered it all, creating a massive puzzle where many pieces are still missing. Every discovery, from hidden mummies to forgotten papyrus scrolls, feels like pulling back just one more layer of this endless mystery. Modern technology has given us tools the ancient explorers never dreamed of. Satellites can detect faint traces of buried structures. Ground-penetrating radar and muon scanning have revealed hidden voids inside the Great Pyramid and tombs long thought to be fully explored. DNA analysis has traced royal family trees and revealed diseases that plagued the pharaohs. Yet, even with these advances, Egypt keeps surprising us. New tombs are still being discovered every year, sometimes in areas thought to be fully excavated. Ancient papyri occasionally surface with details about daily life, trade routes, and religious rituals we never imagined. And there are still vast regions of the desert that have barely been explored at all. But perhaps that's part of Egypt's enduring magic. That sense that no matter how much we uncover, there will always be more. Each mystery leads to another. Finding Ichtawi might raise new questions about the Middle Kingdom. Discovering Imhotep's tomb could change how we view science in the ancient world. Locating Punt might rewrite what we know about ancient trade. And who knows what secrets still lie beneath the sands of Saqqara, Luxor, or the Western Desert. Egypt is like a living time capsule, one that only reveals itself piece by piece. And maybe that's why we keep coming back. The mystery itself is what keeps the story alive. So, after all we've explored, from missing tombs to vanished cities, from the heretic Pharaoh Akhenaten to the lost capstone of the Great Pyramid, what do you think Egypt is still hiding? Will we one day uncover it all? Or will some secrets remain buried forever? Share your thoughts, because the story of ancient Egypt isn't over. It's still being written, one discovery at a time.